Good evening, everybody. Don't you just love the beautiful sunny weather outside today? I think it's, just kidding, I love the rain. But, so today, my mom and I will be talking about reincarnation, and I was really interested in talking about this because I have a brother in the process of reincarnation. So I was like, why not? I want to widen my knowledge. So I will be talking about a case from the book right there, Missionaries of the Light, and about a specific case about someone who will go through the process of reincarnation. But for now, I'm going to pass the word to my mom, and yes.
Thank you, Sarah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. And as we say that, we are encompassing those that are in the spirit realm, in the balconies of the Spiritist Society of Baltimore. Believe it or not, it's okay. They're covered. They're not getting rained on. So we speak not only to the incarnates, but also to the discarnate spirits that are here to listen and be reminded about this topic of reincarnation. The topic of reincarnation is a pillar. It is a pillar of spiritism, and most of us know about it. We know what it is. We hear about it. We all kind of maybe it's always in the back of our mind. But today we wanted to touch on a few things about reincarnation. And, as this little joke says, if you believe in reincarnation, when you die, instead of RIP or RIP, should it say BRB, which is be right back? So, and this is something for us to think about as we live our lives. And I know that my daughter's generation, it's very popular to say YOLO. You only live once. It's common. There's T-shirts, and I don't know that it's so common to keep saying now, but that generation believes that YOLO, you only live once, just do it. Let's not think about the consequences. Who cares? But in reality, it shouldn't be YOLO. It really should be BRB or, not YOLO, or you live many times. So think about it. Think about everything that you're doing. It's important to think about reincarnation, but today we're going to be not going into depths because reincarnation is a very broad subject and it can be broken down into a lot of subdivisions. But today we're going to be discussing the following: the bigger picture, our goals, why we need to reincarnate, justice, family foundation, and of course, 2 cases of reincarnation. And last but not least, ways to optimize our life now. A lot of people like to think about it and wonder what they were in the past, or they want to go into hypnotherapy to, be regressed back. But we want to focus on the life we have now and what we're working with. But to start us out, I wanted to show a little video. You can go on YouTube, and there are so many cases just in the U.S., of young children remembering their past lives. So there are many cases online. I just chose one. It's one of the shorter ones that I could play here. So bear with me one second. I'm going to pull it up just to start our evening out with a case.
And wrote a description of the day. Years ago, Chase drew and wrote a description of the day he says he died in the Civil War battle that is so vivid in his mind. Because this is what you wrote. You say, yeah. I can only vaguely remember the Civil War regression, but it was so long ago. But what I do remember stands out clearly. Right now, I see myself crouching on my knees behind a rock. I have some kind of rifle with almost a kind of sword built onto it. I am in some sort of valley or something. What's that word right there?
Here?
Here. You spelled it H-E-E-R. Okay.
Uh-oh.
Here.
I was 8.
You were 8, okay. Here is the down view of it. I love the way you spell view too, B-E-W. Okay. Here's a down view of it. Then you show the war zone and where you were, and you say, I was shot by somebody here.
Yes.
Okay. Then we turn the page. You say, I'm behind that rock. I am shouting everywhere, not knowing what else to do. Then I am shot right in the wrist very badly, and I have blackouts. Now I'm at a hospital at the camp. The hospital looks like this. And then the cannon. After I'm held, I'm marching back to the battlefield when I see a cannon pass by on something like a cart pulled by a horse, roped down very well. Next thing I know, I'm behind a cannon. Look on the map.
Oprah,
yes.
Can I add something? I've written a couple of articles about their experience and about other children's experiences. And, someone found the description of the field hospital, and he was a Civil War buff, and he checked some photographs and sent them to us of Civil War field hospitals, and you have these that match the description.
Yes, I was fascinated by this because you described a kind of poles with drapes, but you didn't know what it was, but that's what they had. It was like a tent, which looks like a pole with drapes. Well, yesterday we had Chase meet with an artist, and that artist drew the scenes that Chase described from the past life. Let's take a look at these. Tell us what we're looking at here, Chase.
This was the battlefield. You can see right around here is where I was shooting into the valley, and I was shot by someone right around here. Then I remember someone carried a friend of mine that was in my, I don't know, league or whatever. Regiment, yeah. He carried me back to around here to the hospital.
Down here.
Yeah, it was,
Yeah, where those little cabins are down there.
Carried me
Little
back
huts.
to the hospital, and that's when I was healed, and the bullet was taken out of me. And then I remember myself being taken to some cabins of some sort.
Now, how did you know you were black?
I could see it.
Oh,
I
you
could
could
see
see-
myself.
Oh, okay. Now, don't you find that, you little red-haired freckle boy here today, that you would see yourself as a black soldier?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, indeed, when we begin to think about and remember and always take into account that we live many lifetimes, it's very hard to be, for instance, a racist when here you have a red-headed, freckled white boy who clearly, vividly remembers one of his previous incarnations as an African American. So it's the beauty of reincarnation is that it completely kills, if you will, any notion that one race is better than the other, that I'm above anybody else because I could potentially be born a king or a pauper, or of this race or of that race. It's important to always think about the bigger picture, because in societies we have cells, subcells, I would say, in society, and that would be our families. And I would say the majority of our problems, our struggles are where? Are in relationships. We don't suffer over menial things like choosing a color of the car I need to buy, or, which breed of dog I want to purchase, although maybe that might be a struggle for some people. But our real struggles are within our family settings for everybody. If it's not this life, perhaps it was a previous one, or maybe it'll be one to come. And we say struggle in the sense of trying to understand and find balance and work with others in relationships. But without family, without that, in the Spirit's Book, question 775, they say, without the institution of family, the relaxing of family ties will make us much more selfish. So living in families allows us to be more compassionate, understanding. It might not look like that if we only view it from one lifetime, because you might say, well, I have this sister, or I have this uncle in my family, and he's so selfish. He doesn't fit in here. Well, maybe in this life he is. He has many more lives to live still. He'll get there. We all will get there. We can't perfect everything in one life. But that's the purpose. That's one of the purposes of reincarnation, is for us to work on things. We have goals. We have a purpose. And in the case that Sarah's going to be bringing later today, she's going to be talking about how each one of us have a reincarnatory plan before we're born. So in the Spirit's Book, they talk about that each new existence that we have, our purpose is to reach this relative perfection. I mean, eventually, and I know a lot of us, sometimes the word perfection is so daunting because it has such a negative connotation to it, but perfection in the sense where We have an even balance between our anima and animus, meaning we have a balanced understanding of the feminine and the male and the masculine within us. We have a balance of compassion and love for ourselves, compassion and love for others. It's very seldom you find a person on this earth that has perfected everything. Most of us have perfected maybe a small particular area, but not everything. In the Gospel according to Spiritism, they talk about how you're gonna find people where you might know one side of them and think, man, they're so great, wow. And then something happens to them in their life, whatever it might be, and you think, whew, gosh, I can't believe that they did that, or how could they even possibly, because we can't perfect every single area of our lives in one existence. It's not possible. It is impossible. We can strive for it and get darn close to be the best. Saul in the Bible, who became Paul, was a phenomenal example of someone who can be wretched in a way. He was a murderer, a mass murderer. In his heart, he believed he was doing the work of God. But once he went through a transformation, he went from being this mass murderer, wanting to kill all Christians, to wanting to spread love and understanding and wanted to teach others what Christ came to teach. So much so was his transformation that even Christ's disciples, Peter, James, Luke, was an apostle, they all kind of looked at him like, I don't know about you. Like, you used to kill people like us. So that's how radical his transformation is. But that's why we say he's a good model, because it's possible. It's just very rare. So we shouldn't be discouraged. But our purpose of our incarnation is to strip ourselves of these impurities, our imperfections. But how do we do that, though? That's the question. How was that even accomplished? Sometimes we think that we read these things, and on Thursday nights, we are studying the Spirit's book still, and we read these questions, and they're marvelous, and they're wonderful, and they're enlightening. But when we read these questions, we have to also ask ourselves, well, how do I accomplish that? When we were rereading these questions recently, these are the questions we were asking ourselves. Am I doing this? And what does that look like for me? What am I doing on a daily basis to reach this perfection? What are my goals? Because obviously we know that we're not going to become perfect in every area. Ask ourselves these questions. We should be asking ourselves, how can I work towards this goal? Well, today, this week, I'm going to work on praying for this person at my work who's really giving me a hard time, or I feel like they're giving me a hard time. That can be a great goal. It's specific. It's what you're enduring at that very time. It's a great place to start. A lot of people become very overwhelmed, like, well, there's so many things I could, focus on something small. Joanna D'Angela says that the best things that we can do is focus on the very small things. If the idea is too daunting to work on issues within the family, Joanna says, okay, work on something small. For instance, if you notice that you're kind of a clutter bug and you kind of keep everything, or perhaps you're not the best organized, or perhaps you are not on time for things, okay, set a goal for yourself that week. I'm going to work on time management, and I'm going to work on organization, and I'm going to work on smiling to my mailman every day. That's my goal for this week. Start there. She says that as we fulfill the small things, we will begin to feel more confident within ourselves to tackle the larger. Does that make sense? Does anybody relate to that? A little bit? Somewhat? But what about the aspect of justice? We see this a lot when we see cases on the 10 o'clock news. I see it every day. through the work that I have, working with the population that I do, really horrendous cases of abuse and neglect. You know, you always ask yourself, why? Why this child? Why not that child? Well, in the wisdom of God, not that God is a punishing God, but there is justice. And there would be no justice without reincarnation. It wouldn't make sense for a quote-unquote innocent child to be neglected and left for dead, and another child loved, cared for, and given everything. Where is the justice of God in that? Well, there is justice. All things have a reason for being, whether in past lives, it has to be past lives, or many, many, many incarnations ago. There are always reasons behind everything in our lives. And this is, you can read more about that in questions 167 in the Spirit's book, and a couple before and a couple after. Joanna shares with us in the book, it's here, Family Constellation. The family is the foundation upon which society's immense building is erected. If we don't work on thinking about the bigger picture, which is working within the family constitution that we have, we're in a bit of trouble, because eventually, if not now, in the lifetimes to come, and we'll be illustrating this very point later when we share some of the cases of reincarnation. Because yes, some people might say, well, I just can't deal with it in this life, I'm leaving for the next. That's our prerogative. You can, sure. But as we are reminded in the Spirit's book, you know, we can speed up our progress and meet happiness sooner if we have the courage to face these things. It's not easy. A really good book I recommend thoroughly is a book called Family Constellation by Joanna DeAngelis, an excellent depiction of the roles each person has in a family setting. It is stupendous. Is that even a word anymore? It's amazing. It's very thorough in the understanding of the dynamics of the family. It's very enlightening. So I do recommend, if you haven't purchased that book, I think that's our last one. So it's excellent in understanding. But many of us have felt, you know, most of us might not remember in vivid color or imagery. Thank the good Lord. Trust me, you don't want to remember what you were. If you think about some of your bad tendencies, at this very second, I can think of a couple of my own. Who you are today is a lot better than what you were before, for sure, because we only move forward. But thank God you don't remember what you've done before, or the wrong, or the stuff, even some of the good stuff. I mean, imagine all the close people that you used to love, and then all of a sudden they came to your mind. It'd be very overwhelming. So, but some of us have inklings or feelings, and sometimes that can come across as of a deja vu. Has anyone ever felt a deja vu? Like, man, I know I've been here before, but I haven't, but I know I've been here because I can feel it. Has anyone ever had that before? I remember the first time we drove through, I think it was Georgia. Daniel and I were driving, and I had a panic attack because no one could tell me any different. I had been in that place before, and it wasn't good. And I remember the sensation of kind of what I feel right now, because this baby's, not letting my diaphragm move, so hard to breathe. But I remember the sensation of not being able to breathe and just feeling like the world around me was just crumbling. And I knew in my mind, no, this isn't me. I don't have these things. So I said, well, there's something with this place. It was a particular area, but I don't remember which place in Georgia we were driving through. I couldn't even tell you, but definitely had a deja vu, like I have most certainly been here. Sometimes it's spontaneous flashes. I don't know if anyone wants to share anything, but you can have a spontaneous flash, like just a memory of being somewhere, like a flash of it. You know it when you experience it. Otherwise, it might be hard to think. Strong emotion. Has anyone ever walked into a place? And I'm not talking about feeling that some place is bad. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about when you go into a place and you get emotional. I remember the very first time we went to the Edgar Cayce Foundation at ARE in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And Daniel and I walked into the library, and Daniel can attest to this. I have no idea why. I have no recollection, but I broke down into tears, sobbing. I think it even embarrassed Daniel. So like he took me to the side, like, people were looking at me. Because if you've ever had one of those cries where it's like you couldn't control it. It was beyond you. I don't know if you've ever had experience, anybody, where it just sort of overtook you. So is it evidence? It's a possibility. Why would someone have such a strong emotion? Someone might say, well, there are womanly things. It wasn't a womanly thing that month. I assure you it was not. It was a very strong emotion, and I've never experienced anything like that specific event. Again, I've never walked into a place and said, like that, other than Georgia. So, something for us to think about and pay attention to. Spontaneous experiences of young children. Some of us who have had young children, or who have nieces and nephews, or who have babysat a young child under the age of 8, may have expressed some sort of sentiment of, oh, I was there before. We're going to talk about some cases later. I remember my youngest brother, my only brother actually, when he was 3 or 4, talking to someone, or perhaps with my mother or my father, about this existence, and he was so emphatic about it. And he would describe, and he would say, I remember when you dropped me off and you left me there, and you abandoned me, and you never came back for me. I remember that, Mom. And so that always stuck with him, even to his adult years, I believe. Although he says he doesn't remember saying that anymore, but we remember it. My parents sure remembered it. And it touched something within my mother, because I remember her telling the story many decades later, that she felt something that perhaps, yes, indeed, in a previous incarnation, her and her present husband, her late husband, did indeed abandon him when he was an infant. And he had perfect recollection when he was a small child, and would frequently tell my parents that, well, you abandoned me, you left me. So, and those were just spontaneous. It wasn't anything that brought it on. My mother was a stay-at-home mom, so she never dropped us off to anybody. She was always home. So there was nothing that could have triggered it. It just was something spontaneous that popped up. So it's very interesting when you see that. We can also, and this is, I feel, is more common sometimes, is dreams and nightmares, even as adults. Because a lot of the spontaneous experiences of young children, we know that happens before the age of 8, usually. But dreams and nightmares, some of us might be able to distinguish between, I know that this was a past life, and this was just, I just had a really spicy burrito last night, and it gave me a nightmare. But if you know yourself well enough, you'll be able to distinguish between, perhaps this was a previous existence I've lived with someone or in a specific place. So these are just some evidences that are out there. And there's also a lot of research done in terms of, in the US and globally, and what's the percentage of people that believe in reincarnation. This was just one that was done polling Americans. The entire poll was a sample size of a little over 2,000. And they found that 24% of the public overall and 22% of Christians acknowledged that they believed in reincarnation. Of course, that people will be born again. So it's interesting that, when you look at this, what's out there, and even doing a lot of research for this talk, the comment section under YouTube videos, Americans, or English speakers, I should say, under these videos, there's like thousands of comments, and I was reading through 10s, 20, 30 comments on each video of people giving their own accounts saying, yeah, I believe in reincarnation, yeah, I had this experience when I was a kid, and this happened. I mean, there are really hundreds of thousands of people that believe in reincarnation. Maybe they don't believe in a lot of other stuff, but they believe that, yeah, I've lived before, and yeah, I'm going to come again. So it's something interesting because people might think, well, I don't want to talk about reincarnation to people because it might freak them out. You know, we're at work. I don't know about you guys. Sometimes we try to be really careful what we say, but I think I've shared this before, that I was pleasantly surprised at the amount of people that believe in spirits or ghosts, as I hear that term more often. Ghosts and, oh yeah, I'm gonna see my loved one. There was a story of a coworker who said her grandmother, who died a number of years ago, and literally on her deathbed, everyone was saying goodbye to the grandmother, and the grandmother said to her, just this particular granddaughter, she said, Molly, in my next life, will you let me be your daughter? Because you're such a wonderful mom to your girls, and I really would like to be your daughter. And she was so shocked because her mother was like a really strict Catholic, and was so surprised that her grandmother said that to her. But she said, of course, Grandma, I'll take you on as my daughter in the next life. Not really thinking about it much at the time, she said, but she said after the fact, it really made her think, like, what if? What if life after death exists? So it's just something interesting of things that can actually occur, and that people, perhaps more people do believe in it, might be scared to share it, or don't know what to call it. In any event, there is a plethora of books that are out there in the English language. The most famous one, I think, that came out in the 1970s, was Dr. Ian Stevenson. He's a professor at the University of Virginia. He has passed many, many years ago. But Dr. Jim Tucker actually carries on his work till this day on studying cases of reincarnation in children. So his book was called 20 Cases of Suggested Reincarnation, Cases of Reincarnation. It is online. It's free. I posted it to my Facebook page because the book is kind of, from the 1970s. It's a free PDF. It's online. It's like 400 or 500 pages, I think. It's not a big book. But he details, Dr. Ian Stevenson, all the information that he gathered. So it is a very good read. For those of you who don't like to read, get a cup of coffee and read it, because it's really a book to be studied. It's not a book like a leisurely book where you sit and in your bed and you might fall asleep with it, but it's really a very detailed, good book. Equally is Dr. Brian Weiss, the work he has done in the field of psychiatry and psychology and mental health in general, opening up our minds to the idea of reincarnation. This book is excellent. You can still purchase it. It's a great book. Same Soul, Many Bodies. Same Soul, Many Bodies. He also has many other books. I think, I can't even name all of them. In this particular book, he actually shares cases of his patients that he's done past life regression on. An interesting tidbit about Dr. Brian Weiss is that he fell into regression therapy by accident. He didn't start out believing. He said that one day he was working with a patient who had a phobia, and he told her under hypnotherapy, well, let's go back to a time where your phobia started. And inadvertently, she starts talking about a lifetime, like 3 centuries prior. And that's kind of how his work started. So he began documenting these cases and publishing a lot of them. This particular case I wanted to bring because it really illustrates how things can follow us through our family units from one life to the next. So this is the case of Christina. It is on page 208 of this particular book. Christina in this life actually is a Brazilian immigrant. She lived in Brazil. She's from a very, very wealthy family in Brazil. They didn't mention her last name, but supposedly someone well-known in the industry of clothing and stuff, her family, her father. So she lived in Brazil. Father migrated to the U.S. He made tens of thousands, hundreds of dollars. He was living in Miami. Long story short, they never had a good relationship. Her father was the kind of stereotypical Latin male that was very chauvinistic and that believed that the woman was inferior to man and that what the man said, what the husband said, was it. So she grew up like that with a father like that. So they had a very strained relationship. There's a patriarchal family. Christina grows up and gets married to a man she doesn't really love, but that her father approves of. She eventually has 2 girls, gets divorced, and that is a no-no in her Catholic family. She disgraced her family, but repaired things with her father in a way. But she continued with an unhappy relationship with her father most of her life, her adult life. It came to a point where she was working. Her father called her from Brazil after she got divorced and said, "Come work with me in Miami, and you can help me with the family business." So Christina did, because she was very good in business. So she said, okay, fine. She came over to the U.S., to Miami, and it turned out that her father, because she had hoped that, well, maybe dad had changed, maybe all this time had passed, and he was opening up his arms to her, saying, "Come, live with me, I'll help you, I'll support you and your girls." Well, that wasn't it at all. He continued to verbally abuse her and mistreat her when she came over. So she reached a point in her life where she was extremely miserable, so she sought out Dr. Weiss to help her figure out how she can move on, because she was at a crossroads in her life. She had started her own company, branched out, and was becoming very successful, making tens of thousands of dollars in Miami, whereas her father's company was going bankrupt. And he asked her to drop her company that was skyrocketing to come over to him and give him her money. So she said, "Dr. Weiss, I'm at a crossroads. I don't know what to do because I don't want to go back to that abusive situation, but I don't know what to do because he's my father. And I love him, even though I hate him." Okay. So Dr. Weiss said, well, let's do some regression therapy. So she lays down, and he starts to regress her to her past lives. And he says to her, let's go back to the first time you can recall when the issues with your father started. So although she didn't, in her hypnotic state, she couldn't remember, or she didn't state the time, but she went as far back to when she lived in an Islamic culture in North Africa. She was then a male writer, and her father was also a male writer too, and that was her first recollection of when she was very jealous of her father because he was very successful in that incarnation. Fast forward to the next incarnation she had with her father was the 12th century. She was a he in that life as well. She was a beloved male priest and whose father was a farmer. The priest's father was very jealous of his son, and the father was a very vile human being in that world, in that life. There was a priest in their local village. There was a girl, rather, in that local village who fell in love with the priest, but respected, obviously, that he was a priest, and just said that she was going to serve God alongside him. This angered the priest's father, and the father was able to, who had some connections, had his own son killed. When the girl heard of that, she threw herself off of a cliff. And then the priest explains that the girl who was a priest explains that she remembers floating above the village and following the father in the misery of his life, and that she felt happy in that existence as a spirit watching her father suffer, but with the acute understanding that that wasn't right, the sentiment that she held in her heart, or he held in his heart. Fast forward a little bit more. The next incarnation she was regressed back to was in the 1800s in England, where now she was back to being a female. She was a worker in a factory, And she was very bright. She was in her early 20s, very bright, very good with business, knew how to run things, and had really good ideas. And her supervisor was able to notice that. Well, the supervisor gave her the impression that he loved her, so she fell in love with him. She gave him all these great ideas for the company, and he began to utilize the ideas, and the company grew. But then, after it began to grow, he got promoted, and he dumped her. And then she found out that he was only using her. So that, again, was the same cycle of betrayal and hatred and jealousy. So it had been going on for centuries. I mean, the story might have been told maybe she was regressed around the 1990s, but if you think how long she had been suffering the same cycle of hate, jealousy, love, until this incarnation where she came back as his daughter, and it was the same cycle again of hatred and jealousy and love. But Dr. Weiss said at the very last regression that he did with her, when he started to bring her back to her present self, he said that she remained in a semi-lucid state, almost as if her spirit guide, as we would say in Spiritism, began communicating, talking about loving and forgiving. And at the end of all that, she came into this revelation. And she said, it isn't his sins. I must change. It's my own. I've hated him for millennia. Hatred is a sin. But what if I eradicate hatred with love? It was as if she had an epiphany, Dr. Weiss said. He said in the book, he explains his own thoughts, that he wasn't convinced. But she said she had a different idea, to not allow her father to go destitute, but found a way also for her to still flourish. So instead of staying in the business, because her father had a clothing business in Miami that was very popular, she also had a competing business. So she said, I'm good at business. This is what I'm good at. Instead of working in clothing, I'm going to start working in pottery. So she built her own little business and actually became very successful in that area. So for her, it was a balance where she decided to stop the cycle of hatred and jealousy. And she decided that it wasn't about him. Her father had to deal with his own stuff, his own anger, his own hatred, his own jealousy. But she said, I got to work on me. I have to focus on myself so I stop hating, so I don't stay in the same cycle of jealousy. So it's very interesting. He said, after that, she no longer required therapy. Her life, Dr. Weiss said, because she called him many months later, giving an account of how her life turned upside down. She was completely different perspective. She no longer felt this anger towards her father, and he too actually changed. And she said, Dr. Weiss, a couple of weeks ago, we had a family dinner, and my father pulled me aside into the corridor, and for the first time in my life that I can recall, he hugged me and embraced me close and said, I love you. And that was sort of the solidification. And that, I truly believe, we truly believe, is the epitome of when Peter said, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers a multitude of sins. And when we say sins, it's such an archaic word, but I love the definition that I heard recently, that sin is just a deviation from that which is good. It's not hitting the mark. It's not hitting the nail on the head. It's kind of missing it a little bit. So and we all have those moments where we do something and it's not quite right. We all do that. So love really heals all of that. But it is an internal work for us to do. It's an amazing story, right? I mean, think about the millennia we've been with the people in our lives. It's never by chance. And many times, I know that, or I imagine, migrating from a different country and to a new country that is not your own, it's not your culture, it's not your language, your family's not here. I always try to take that consideration to the people that are around me because I could never do that, not in this life at all. So I think it's very courageous for people to come here and to start a life and to create a family. But it's amazing when you find pockets of people or you meet random people that become as if they were family. And I think here at the Spirit Society of Baltimore, we sort of found that in a way. People that we've met that have inspired us. But it's good for us to remember that nothing is by chance. And just like Christina, we're all Christina. All of us are, in some way, shape, or form, good or bad. So it's good for us to remember reincarnation and its purpose, because ultimately, this is the hope where we should be reaching for. And to lead us as we begin to wind down and almost close for the evening, I'm going to invite Sarah to come up to talk about the case of Sigesmundo.
Hello. So, how's everybody doing? You guys all look tired. Now is the time where you wake up and you share the same interests as I did. So, in chapter 12 of this book, there is a special case of Sigesmundo, and he's very interesting, and I'll get to that later. So, the case starts out with Andre Luis and one of his spirit mentors, Alexandre, who I'll call Alex. And they're visited by a friend, as one of the spirit workers that is a very close friend with them. And he asked to help in the reincarnation process of Sigesmundo. And Andre Luis is very happy about this. And he's like, oh, I want to participate in watching this and how it goes on. And the spirit mentor, Alex, agrees, but he has to spend 1 week in the reincarnation center that is in the spirit colony. So they go to the reincarnation center, and on the way there, they see a lot of workers. And they see the workers holding these chart-like things, and Andre Luis is like, why are they holding these things, and what are they for? And he explains that they're sort of like blueprints for people's lives. Like each one of you had one of those little charts for your life before you came here. So that's nice to think about. But so it kind of just outlines your life and like what type of body you'll have and what are you trying to accomplish in that life. So when they get inside the reincarnation center, he meets a spirit mentor named Josino, and he's going to mentor him for the week while he's staying there. And Andre Luis notices off to the side these two statues, if you will, of human bodies. And I found that very interesting because I love biology. So when they were explaining it, I was like, whoa. So it's kind of like a glowy substance, and each part of the body, like your heart, your muscles, your skeleton, was like outlined in this like glowing thing. So in my mind, I was like, whoa. So then they go into this little room, and you see all these workers working on specific parts of your body, let's say the heart or the lungs. And Andre Luis is like, why are they doing this? Why are they spending so much time on one specific part of your body? Or even like a specific case for each individual person. And they explained to him that there are people in this life, or like spirits in this life, who come and reincarnate, and they complete everything they're supposed to do in this life. And they're called the completers. And there are people who don't complete everything they're supposed to complete. They complete like 30% to 40% of what they actually came here to fulfill. And those are called the incompleters. And those people in the room were the incompleters. So either they asked, or the spirit mentors are helping them, in which they reincarnate, but they have like a defect in their body. And I'm not saying that everyone who reincarnates in this life that has a defect in their body, like if you have a missing arm or something, like I'm not saying you do something bad, but because sometimes something truly happens when you're in the womb and something happens, but sometimes you just need to go through that because you did something wrong. But so after this, Andre Luis is kind of just taking us all in. He's like, wow. So the time has come where he has to witness the reincarnation process of Sigesmundo. So they go to the house of this guy named Adelino and Raquel, and they're kind of observing Adelino's character because they want to see how they can approach him and talk to him about Sigesmundo, because he was really hesitant about him reincarnating in his family. So they inspire their 3-year-old son by him asking questions, and that touches Adelino's heart. So that calms him down. So when he goes to sleep and he wakes up, his spirit mentors can talk to him calmly, and they're like, what's wrong? Like, you seem really upset. And Adelino expresses that he feels as if a spirit is obsessing him and trying to wreck his family life. And the reason why he feels this is because in the previous incarnation, Adelino, Raquel, who is Adelino's wife, and Sigesmundo had this love triangle thing where Sigesmundo fell in love with Raquel and they had an affair, and Adelino didn't know. And as soon as he found out, he was angry, but Sigesmundo murdered Adelino. So Raquel was really accepting of Sigesmundo reincarnating in that family because she had committed a wrong too, and she was willing to put all the hatred aside and just work on like her progression. But Adelino couldn't forgive Sigesmundo for basically stealing his wife and murdering him. So they tell him that he needs to let that go and focus the task at hand because he had forgotten what he came in this life and what he was supposed to do. So Adelino accepts that, and he goes to sleep, or he goes back to his physical body very happy, wakes up happy. So during the next couple of days, the spirit mentors prepare Sigesmundo for reincarnation, and they prepare him by telling him to envision himself as if he was smaller and resembled that of a fetus. And they lowered his vibration so he could be connected to the physical realm more easily than to the spiritual realm. So when the time had come, they brought Sigesmundo down to his parents, and while they were asleep, and they started connecting him to the embryo, and then at that moment, the process of reincarnation had begun. So in the end, I encourage you to read more because it was actually really interesting, and there are some details I left out because it's a long case. But you should read more because it's a really good book, and I will pass the word back to my mother.
Thanks, Sarah. Thank you, Sarah. That was great. So, and this is the book she was talking about. It's a really good book. And Sarah, would you recommend the other members within your youth group to read this?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because it was cool.
Because it was cool. So it is very interesting. And as we were preparing for this and researching for this, we had some really interesting discussions surrounding reincarnation and why does this happen and how does this happen. And so it's really good for our youth or children for them to be reading such books because these are great conversation starters because as soon as your kid would start reading it, they're going to ask questions. Even the vocabulary, they're going to have to ask questions because some of the vocabulary here is very advanced. But Sarah attested to that it is a very deep and profound book, one to be studied. But Sarah, I'm going to call you back up here again as my, I want to say accomplice, maybe in a previous life, but in this life, my helper. So we're going to be talking about ways to optimize this life, ways to make the best out of this life that you have. Do you have any recommendations how to make this life the best it can be? Sarah, you want to share?
If there's something you want to accomplish, whether that's like you want to be promoted or you want to get an A if you're in school, like Lulu, she's probably the only one here who's in high school, middle school. If you want like an A on that project, everything requires work. Just as if you want to progress in this life, in your spiritual journey, everything requires work. If you sit down and you think about, oh, I wish I was Beyonce because she's so successful. Like, I mean, maybe you won't be Beyonce, but you'll be pretty close to that if you, like, put hard work in it. And, like, you can't just sit around and do nothing. And, like, I know I have to practice what I preach because I know some days I'm like, I don't want to do my homework. But, you know, we always have to work for what we want, and just be optimistic about everything. Don't be a person that's like pessimistic, because when I'm at school and I see people complain all the time, I'm like, is there nothing you're grateful for? Because I'm pretty sure you have a house, you have food, you have a phone, and people in Africa don't have that at all. People in Africa don't even know what food is, probably. Well, not like that, but you know. So be a glass half full kind of person instead of being a glass half empty. I mean, you can have days where you're like in bed and you're like, oh my goodness, I don't want to go to work today. I can't deal with Sherry or like Leonard because they're so annoying. But, you know, you just got to go into your work situation and just be happy. Be like, you know, I'm going to deal with Sherry because she's my boss. I have to, you know, but just be happy with yourself.
And that's a great transition of giving forgiveness. Absolutely. Yeah, sure. That's a great example of giving forgiveness to Sherry or Leonard, because giving forgiveness is a great way also to start sometimes, because we have to start somewhere. So sometimes it's just turning over a new leaf. Volunteering is an excellent way. I like to think of volunteering as sort of, when you begin to do it and the more you work on it, it begins to transform areas of your life that you didn't even quite know needed transforming. You might even notice that your loved ones might say things like, wow, Cheryl, you really are changed, or you're much more calmer than you were before. Because it's been scientifically proven that it's good for your health, it modifies your perspective, and it just makes us overall view things in a different perspective, because the more we give, the more we are receiving. I shared on my Facebook page just maybe a day or so ago a letter that went viral in early January or early February. It's a 26-year-old girl. She posted to her Facebook. It's rather lengthy. I posted both the video that someone made of her letter and also the actual letter itself on my Facebook page. But this 26-year-old was diagnosed with a very rare cancer, and after a year of battling it, she passed away. But the 24 hours before she passed away, she posted to Facebook, and it sort of was, life advice from a 26-year-old who's dying. And it's quite moving. And one of the things she says, that as she watched her body wither away to nothing, and she said, as I watched my body be nothing but skin and bones, I review my life. And one of the things that I wish I had done more of was to give, that I had done more giving in my life. Now, she was relatively happy with her life as a whole. She lived it. She was good. She was kind. She actually tried to eat and exercise and eat organic and do all these things. And she met and isn't this sounds like, actually, when I read her case, it reminded me of a case that Leo and I had discussed in the book Action and Reaction in our web series. Because she was 26, engaged to the love of her life, had a fantastic family life. She said she loved her family, her parents, her siblings. She had everything, and beautiful physique, blonde, blue eyes, gorgeous, looked like a model. And one day, she found out that she was dying, had an incurable, rare cancer. So it makes us think. And she tells, and I really, really, really recommend you guys take a minute out of your day, go to my Facebook page, look for it. It just was a few days ago that I posted it. Because it's so touching what she says, where she says, now that I'm dying, I don't worry about the stupid things that I think I used to worry about before, about, not always being skinny enough, or worrying about where I'm going to get this or where I'm going to get that. Everything gets put into perspective, and all of a sudden, the small things that I used to worry about no longer matter, but what mattered are my relationships with people and the love that I gave to others. So I really recommend reading that, because being kind to others is important, because no matter who we are, we all experience pain and we all struggle. There are a lot of people that put on a great face and that I say are experts. They have a great mask. Phenomenal. I'll never forget the girl that I met years ago when I used to work in the hospital, and she was the pillar of perfect. All-American, beautiful. Everyone liked her. She liked everybody. Couldn't see anything wrong with her. She was a great nurse, good family. And we all went out one day. And she had a little bit to drink. And we were in a corner in this place, just her and I just talking. Everybody else was off doing things. So her and I began talking. And I was completely lucid because I didn't have anything, didn't drink anything. And she began telling about her life and that. She said to me, "My life is perfect, right, you think?" And I was like, "Yeah." Let's call her Ashley. "Yeah, Ashley, are you kidding me? I want your life. Are you serious? You have great family. Your parents love you. Your siblings. I mean, you come from money, and you're a humble person. You're kind." And she starts laughing and laughing. Not at this point, I'm thinking maybe she's obsessed by a spirit or something. But then she says, "No." Then she starts crying, and I'm really thinking she's possessed. And she begins detailing her life. That's appearances have been nothing. That she had been sexually abused for decades and could never tell anybody for so many reasons. And that it was a secret within the family. And she wasn't the only one that was abused by this person. But because they were so prominent in their community, wealthy family, gave a lot to their local parish and all these things. So she said, "You don't know how dead I am inside." That was my first experience in my early 20s where I really was able to see in front of me, don't judge a book by its cover because we don't know people's lives. Had I not gone that day, and I was never a person to frequent bars, but I went because a bunch of nurses went. I never would have known that about her. And still to this day, when I think about her, I think, I still can't believe it. But we never discussed it again, and she asked me not to tell anyone or say anything, and she just wanted to go about her business. That's it, and I respected that. She was already in her 20s, she was an adult. But it shocked me, because we don't know what people have gone through in their lives. We do not know, even when we think we do. And it's important to be self-aware. Optimizing our own lives is becoming self-aware, much like Christina, and saying, I need to work on myself. I need to work on this issue or that issue, and owning it. Having what I like to call accountability. A lot of people, and for many, many years, I still have a best friend since I was 9, and we used to joke many years ago, and we used to call each other our accountability partners, because we were allowed to call each other out on our stuff. So for instance, if I noticed she was being really harsh or was doing something wrong, we had this agreement that we had agreed to say, you know what, Lana, you're being a crappy person today. So it's great when you have this person in your life. Sometimes that's our husband. Sometimes it's our children that are teaching us and calling us on our stuff. But it's important to know ourselves, to know what I really need to work on. Because if I don't know, what are you doing every day? What are we doing? What am I doing every day? Working towards a goal, but what goal in my life? I don't really know myself that well. Learning to accept our current reincarnation. I know Paul and I, at some point when we did a shared talk here, I do believe we spoke about this, reframing. Joanna talks about this in Happy Life. I don't know which chapter, but she talks about this. Joanna says that every time we tell the same sob story of our lives, we give life to it, and it's as if it's happening again and again energetically. However, it's not to say that there's not a time and place for that, where we need to work through our issues. Absolutely. But many times, much like Christina, and much like this young girl who's 26 and died of cancer, we begin to, either we're forced to reframe our story because of the circumstances of our lives, or we can take the initiative and look at the perspective, look at it from a different perspective. not from a perspective that, oh gosh, this is going to be so hard and I can't do it. How about saying to yourself, you know what? No, I know that I'm feeling anxious about this, but I'm going to work on it. We like to think that it's almost a small amount of brainwashing your own self into just working at something. In No Solar, the book that's one of the first books psychographed in the series Life in the Spirit World, psychographed by Francisco Xavier, they talk about it in No Solar that fear in human beings is so intense that it is one of the largest impediments for humankind because we're so scared. And it's behind a lot of issues that we have. When you break it down, fear, pride and ego, but fear being a main one, is behind a lot of issues that we cannot overcome because we're scared to face it. If we sit and ask ourselves the question, why do I feel this way? What do I think is the worst thing that's going to happen? Well, I'm scared this is going to happen. When we boil it down, a lot of the times it's fear. But if we reframe our story, begin to want to accept things, and even sort of using it as an affirmation, saying, God, I want to accept this life, maybe even as a prayer, help me to work through it, whatever it is. And if we pray that prayer, it will come to pass. Believe it or not, but it will. Just try. Because ultimately, reincarnation is a charity from God. It is the love that God gives us to be able to come back. Because reincarnation strengthens family ties, whereas one life would destroy them. But allows us to come back, regroup, rectify, redress, and ultimately, much like Christina, love. Reincarnation equals love at the end. That is our main goal when you get down to it. Sarah, I want to invite you up here as well to give your final words as we close out. Any final recommendations for ourselves, and I say ourselves, all of us here, us included, before we close tonight?
Where'd it go? Oh. I'm sorry, I'm just reading this right here. It looks so different when you're here. Like, I'm just taking it in again. Okay. So, some of you probably have, what's the word? Challenges in your life that you're going through, and I don't know anything because all of you look really happy and wonderful people. So, but I mean, depending upon what you're going through, you're probably like, why me? Like, why not Megan over there? Like, I don't like Megan. Why can't she go what I'm going through? But like it says, learn to accept our current reincarnation. Like, you're most often than not probably going through that situation for it to teach you something, and you have to take something out of it. Like, I know when I get in trouble at home, I know it teaches me not to do it again. That's what I learned from it. But if you're going through, like, let's say a hard time through something, like, I guess the thing you can take away from that is how it makes you stronger than you were before. Because, like she said earlier, with reincarnation, or like within this life, like, you can't go back. Like, you're either at one point you're going forward, like, you can't go back at all. So, like, if something bad happens in your life, don't keep telling the same story. I mean, I know I do that, so I need to stop, because I'm like, oh, this happened and I suck. But, I don't, so that's great. And you just got to believe that you just don't suck. And just go throughout your life with optimism, and don't limit yourself to one place in your life. Like, just work for what you want. And if you want to be famous, go ahead and do it. Like, just work, be confident in what you do and who you are, and don't let anybody else tell you that you suck, because you don't. And that's all.
Thank you, Sarah. So, these are some of our take-home messages just for us to think about. And to remember, every morning when you wake up, just know that this is one life in the span of millennia, and that all things can be overcome, just taking it day by day. And as in the words of Sarah, you don't suck. You're amazing. We all are. So thank you so much for this evening, you all guys, everyone, in both realms of life. Do we have time to open for questions? Maybe like one, or if anyone wants to ask Sarah any questions, please feel free. Okay, Sarah, you got a question? Oh, it's from Dr. Arakawa.
Hi, it was very good, your description, but because of the time, of course, you have to highlight. And I read this book a long time ago, so I don't remember anymore, but came to my mind, if Adelino, during the emancipation, during his dream, when he was called to accept Sigesmundo, he was kind of reticent. He didn't want, but finally he was convinced. So when he finally got the baby, I don't remember what was, if there was some difficulties there between father and the baby or not. Can you tell me if there was such a thing, in the relationship?
So you're asking between Adelino and the... Okay. Was there anything in the book about that once he was born?
See, I'm going to be honest. I did not read past that chapter. But if I were to make an inference, and if I were to use I'm going to make a... Oh, I did not know that. I'm sorry. Well, I didn't. Like I said, I'm going to be honest. I didn't read past the chapter because I thought that was the end, but I shouldn't have assumed. But I believe that they probably would not have had any problems. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. Yeah, there's a probability that they didn't have any problems because they came in that life to forgive, and if he went through all that trouble if they went through all the trouble to go to Adelino and kind of inspire him to forgive Sigismundo, I don't think that they would have had any problems because that was what they came to do. And I was already unconsciously in that mentality to forgive him. So I think that they were pretty close.
I can conclusively say that they don't give a further much detail, but as Daniel was saying in the back, the probability is there for them to have some sort of something, perhaps maybe not in the first few years. Sometimes it might emerge later in life. Sometimes it happens a lot in teenage years where things begin to bubble out. Sometimes not. I think it also just depends upon the level of the parents and how life goes by and things that happen and experiences that each person has. Because there are many different cases, not just in this book, in other books of Andrea Louise, where, in real life cases too, that we know of, I think it really has depended upon, again, the parents and different things and how aware they are. And so I think it always varies. But thank you for your question, Yasko. Leo? Is the question for Sarah or myself?
It's for myself. Learning how to question life. Well, thank you first of all for the hard work, because it's never easy to bring these cases and to study and to present. One thing that I noticed is very thorough on the presentation is the fact that we talked about the purpose. We talked about the how do we carry ourselves, know thyself. And we often, not that we would like to have a pat in the back or saying, you're doing a good job. But my question is, when do we know that we were doing the right thing in our reincarnation?
It's a very good question. In the Spirit's book, they tell us that the laws of God are written on our conscience, which means we have an internal sort of meter to let us know, our thermometer rather, to let us know this is going good or, oh, this is going really bad. So only I myself can make that evaluation. And of course, my spirit guide will be inspiring me to say, This is not right. So each person, even if they're not even that self-aware, is going to have a feeling of something is right or something is not. However, as we've learned many times here before at the Spirit Society of Baltimore and probably elsewhere, that there is a level, some of us are sort of in a state of sleep in a spiritual sense, where we are not self-aware at all, and that we are creating thousands of problems. And you might think, isn't that person's internal alarm bell going off? Sometimes it's very small, or it's very low. It's sort of like an alarm clock that's the volume is turned almost all the way down. It's somewhere there. They're just not listening. So I think Annette Guimarães, she's a spirit speaker in Brazil. I like the analogy she gave once. She said, it's kind of like a radio station where some of us that are much more in tune with goodness and wanting to progress. So if you ever notice when no one listens to real radio anymore, I don't think, or the dial radio. I don't think anyone does anymore. But if all of us can remember, sometimes when you're playing with the dial radio, you hear static until you get the perfect station. So it's kind of like that. Sometimes we're tuned directly in to the good spirits because we're working hard, and others are not so finely tuned. There's a lot of static, and there's something there, and we kind of hear it, but some of us just hear static. And so in the book Action and Reaction, there's a story about a man who lived centuries like this, committing the most heinous of crimes, until he was forced into living in a body where he was physically trapped. And you can read about it. Leo, I forget the chapter. But they tell his story, and so that they sort of trapped him for a period of, it was supposed to be maybe like 21 years, for meditation, so he can stop and have time just to think about his life, but also because his crimes were so heinous that he had so many spirits after him that they needed him to get better. And the only way to do that was to hide him in a physical body that was so deformed that none of his old victims could find him. So it really depends on how self-aware we are, because we always like to think that, well, maybe I am so unaware. I always like to ask myself, am I that person that's so unaware that I don't see things? So one of my friends many years ago used to say, well, if many people around you are all telling you the same thing and it's not good, it's highly likely that you're not seeing that. So I always like to think we always like to think that's why in the Spirit's book and in Spiritism, the family unit is so helpful. Family unit, and as we define it nowadays, is very broad. So those that are closest to us in our inner circle are the ones that are seeing who we are most of the time. Maybe it's just one or two people who really know who you are, who see you when you're down in the dumps. And if those people that you trust are telling you some things, it's good for us to listen. I think it was Givaldo who said it's good to listen to those that hate us, because they are the ones that might tell us the truth. Because sometimes the people that love us don't want to hurt us sometimes. So sometimes it's good to listen to your haters, to reflect and think, man, am I really like that? Am I really self-absorbed? Or am I having an action that's self-absorbed? And I'll give a story of myself real quick, and I think I've told the story many times before, where I had many complaints from coworkers that I don't smile enough when I'm at work. I'm very serious. I've always equated that with the fact that I was started out my career in critical care, and nobody smiles. You're busy, you're running, and trying to save lives. So, my mindset, I have so much respect for the profession, for my patients, that I try to stay focused on what I'm doing so I don't mess anything up. But I began hearing it so much, you don't smile, you don't smile, you don't smile. I said, maybe I don't smile. Maybe I should. And I realized when I tried to consciously smile, it was so unnatural to me. I felt so strange, like, good morning. So it's good for us to reflect, not believe everything that everybody tells us, but just to reflect and think about. It's good to do that. Oh, I'm going to grab Paula. She had her hand up first.
Thank you. You can take a deep breath. That was a lot of sharing. And thank you both for such a well-organized presentation. I love this topic, and I think it's great for us to revisit it. I'm just thinking to myself, with the statistics from this Pew Research, that we've only got, let's say, 24% of Americans believing in reincarnation, what do you think some good ways to talk about reincarnation to the other 75%?
You know, I thought about that, Paula, to be honest with you, and trying to, through osmosis, gain some information from all the years that my partner talked about his research and the methods and science. And so from a scientific perspective and trying to have that kind of mind, like, well, how do I reach the other 75%? Well, we don't know what the other 75% is. I mean, and why they don't believe it, or do they? Because although having taken a statistics class, you know, when you take a sample size, it's supposed to be reflective of the whole. So, but at the same time, I would have to question, who are the other 75% of the people? Is it just people in a specific country that just don't accept reincarnation altogether? So I guess it would depend. So for me, this is how I would approach it. I wouldn't approach it on a grand scale. I would take it at a more small group sessions, if you will, because I'm going to say because I don't want to misquote Spiritism and lead anyone in the wrong direction. So I have always been of the belief that Spiritism, unlike many other religions that seek to get converts, does not. So I'm of the belief that I don't want to convince anybody that reincarnation exists. I'll gladly share my beliefs with others, because when I go to YouTube, I see a lot of trash. That's videos that are there, I mean, that have millions of views. And so I think to myself, well, trash is out there, it's getting millions of views. There's also really other good videos that are out there about reincarnation that's not exactly according to Spiritism. So that's why I think a lot of us work towards putting things out on social media that are positive, putting things out, putting videos out, you know, talking on Spiritist radio, because we want to say, look, I just want to put it out there. So today's day and age, social media and media of all forms is the new thing, you know? So I think just putting it out there and trying to live, without sounding corny, trying to live your best life and allowing that to change people. Because when you live something, you are like the best book you can give to anybody. Because I remember meeting a friend maybe a decade ago, and I just met her, didn't know anything about her, but she seemed so serene all the time. And then one day I finally kind of mustered up the courage to kind of ask her, because I didn't really know her. And I asked her, you know, I noticed you're like so calm and like Zen all the time. I'm like, what's your secret? And she said, oh, I'm a practicing Buddhist, and I meditate and I do this. And I said, wow, I can really see it. And I always think about that person, because I think, wow, I hope, I strive to live my life for people to say, oh, I know that she's on the right path because she's living right. So I think that's the best thing that we can give to the world and to the people around us, is to be our best self. So that's how, and I've gotten that question before, Paula. There have been many discussions, I think, between us at the center and other places about, well, how do we reach this group of people? But, you know, we're not here to convert people, just here to live our best life and encourage others. Anybody else? Oh, Alba, sorry.
Thank you, Sarita and Kirsten. It was wonderful to see the three of you in action. Yeah, Rafael was there, of course. Actually, I have several questions, but I'm just going to do one. The very topic of all in Spiritism is like fascinating, because it provides so much hope. It is a personal experience on how the idea of reincarnation can bring hope and for your life, because the vision of life shifts. So talking about reincarnation and pregnancy, and since you are undergoing that phase, which is awesome, how, and this is for mothers that are like you right now, how current mothers that are expecting their babies can help the spirit in the process of reincarnation. Because not everybody comes very happy, like, yeah, I'm going to air, yeah. Some others, they do willingly, but some other spirits, they are not. They are telling them, you need to go. So how a mother that may be listening to us or may watch the video one day in YouTube, how can this mother help the baby and the spirit to feel hopeful, to feel tranquil in this new life?
So the 12th Spiritist Symposium is in April, and I'm actually going to be talking about that very subject, so I encourage all of you to go. Small plug. So there are many different scenarios I could address, because there are people that plan their pregnancy. There are others that are unplanned, and I do quotation marks because we know, according to Spiritism, that nothing's by chance. Nothing's like, oh my gosh, I was with this person one night and it happened. No, there actually is planning behind it. That's a topic for different discussion. However, I'd say let's use the case where you've planned it. You know that this is what you and your partner wants, or you and someone that you're getting together with. There are ways, and Maria Montessori was asked that question by a pregnant mother, when do I start preparing for my child? And she said, before you were pregnant. So ideally, in an ideal world, before a woman or a couple gets together to have a child, that they're both preparing together in an ideal world to become more spiritual. Because you can't, what is the phrase? You might be able to lie to yourself, but you can't lie to God. So we can't pretend with the spirits incarnating, because they're going to know. They're going to feel it because they're connected specifically to the mother energetically. So I myself and my partner need to work on spiritualizing ourselves. Whether you're a Buddhist or you're a Catholic or you're a Spiritist, working towards being reminded of the purpose of reincarnation. And also for us as Spiritists, setting aside time, perhaps it's your God at home, to pray for that spirit, to also, I'll speak personally as a pregnant person, to speak to that incarnating spirit. Majority of the time, much like Sigesmundo, that spirit, even before the mother knows she's pregnant, it's already around the family. I know that I felt the spirit come before I was actually pregnant. So the spirit's already around the mother, getting acclimated to the environment, because otherwise it's going to be a drastic shock for the spirit, and that doesn't happen like that. It's not all of a sudden one day they get Jimmy and Jimmy's connected to Sarah. It's a process. So working the mother working on herself. Now, if you happen to find yourself pregnant and you didn't plan it, you do your best. Same thing. Work on talking to the spirit, reassuring them it's going to be okay. We're going to get through this. Now, if there's a mother watching this, might actually feel like, I don't know that I'm going to get through this. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm in a bad situation. Many people throughout the U.S., throughout the globe, go through this. I went through this with my first pregnancy. Didn't know what I was going to do. But the best thing you can have is faith and hope, and in the knowledge and know that everything is planned by God, and that all you need is love. I mean, the Beatles said it, so it has to be true. But it couldn't be more correct, because the richest of richest families, when they are devoid of love, the richness of wealth does nothing. But the poorest of poorest, when they have love, it is everything. So in my understanding of everything, if all you have is love to give and reassurance every day to that incarnating spirit that, hey, Joey, we welcome you. We love you, no matter what has happened. I do this. No matter what, especially after giving this talk and doing research and thinking, well, this spirit's coming, already knowing what happened before, and I have no recollection. To say to this spirit, I don't care what happened before. We're going to focus on love in this incarnation. You have everything to gain. We're spiritists. We're good. You got it made. You not only have two parents, you have an older sibling that's also going to love you. That's 3 people guaranteed are going to love you to death. That's most than a lot of people get in this life. So some people can only count on one person, and sometimes it's not even their parent. So I feel like whatever you can offer that child, the most important thing is the love and the constant reminder to the Spirit that no matter what, we're going to get through this. You know, this life is a new chance. Let's embrace it. This is wonderful. I think that's, in my opinion, some of the things that you can do daily or weekly, in my humble opinion. But thank you for your feedback. Alba, question. So because of time, because we are way over, we need to transition.